Right on. So we're excited to have everybody joining us today. A couple housekeeping things. This presentation is going to be recorded and available in the next probably 24 hours on the White Labs YouTube channel. If you have any questions and want to chat a bit, we definitely encourage engagement to anything we're talking about, or just maybe a story that you wanted to share with everybody on the call today too. Please use the Q&A box, and I'll keep an eye on that and monitor it as we go. Well, we lost Chip. I don't know where he went.
I was getting that GoPro shot running, man.
But I'm Erik Fowler. I'm the education manager at White Labs. Hopefully you guys have seen some of our content or seen me doing some of these webcasts before. But Jacob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacob Hoover, and I'm the education experience supervisor here at White Labs. Excited to talk a little bit about homebrewing this morning with Chip and Erik.
Chip, the biggest nerd of them all.
I'm a poser. Do you want me to introduce myself?
Go for it.
I'm Chip Walton. I do many things. I produce a web show called Chop Brew. I am like a digital content producer for Northern Brewer Homebrew Supply. I'm about to be a first-time father, and I'm a griller of hamburgers for Beagles. Yesterday, I made Charlie P a birthday burger, and it was really funny, actually. I woke up.
Have you ever mentioned to Charlie the dog's name? And is that like an endearing?
Yeah, I have one of my favorite pictures I have with Charlie P the man signing a picture of Charlie P the dog at I don't know if it was Seattle. It was one of the national homebrew conferences, HomebrewCon, and he thought it was funny. I can't remember. It's upstairs. He signed it. I think it just said Charlie P the dog. Just relax. Charlie P the man. And I was kind of like, can you sign it, Charlie P the man? Like a name and title, please. So yeah,
that's awesome.
He's aware of the connection.
Yeah. And so what we're going to be chatting about this morning is really just what a lot of us have been working on. For Jacob and myself, it's a lot more recent in what we were doing to take into the digital platform. But it's something that Chip, you've been doing for a long time, and I think maybe you're seeing now with a lot of people stuck at home and trying to keep that connection up, just higher engagement, right? Have you been brewing anything lately that's been influenced by your loneliness and your the amount of time you're spending on a webcam and Zoom calls?
No, I will say, it's tougher because when for the sake of video, when I brew, or when I shoot video, I prefer to shoot other people brewing. It's just easier to kind of like be the fly on the wall. It's easier to get them to react to what they're doing. I would say, kind of to your point, like anything new shot this year on the Chop and Brew front, at least, has felt kind of lonely. It's been a lot of like camera set on tripod. You can see my feet around the kettle, and it's not as engaging, I don't think. But thankfully, I shoot way more than I have time to edit. So I've got stuff that I'm still working on coming out of the vault from like 2 and 3 years ago to kind of help people, and people will call it out. They'll be like, that's not socially distant. And then I'm like, well, look at I always throw a date stamp on there. If I feel like it's going to be awkward, I'll put like Chip and Don Osborne, and then July 18th, 2017, you know what I mean? Just so there's like, how'd this guy from Vienna get here during the pandemic? But yeah, so I've shot a lot of myself, and then, I kind of like had to pivot, just like everything in this world, work, play, logistics, I pivoted to like a lot of these kind of things, like Zoom interviews, even toying around with giving someone a camera and then like having them shoot and then bring the card back to me, and I'll try to put it together. And I think that that's probably going to, unfortunately, continue, mixed in with other stuff though from the vault and from the arsenal that exists. Like I ran across, I thought I lost this card to the ages, and found it the other day when moving my office down to the basement to make room for the nursery upstairs, and I popped it in, and I was like, yes, it's like the club night footage from 2014 that on one card only had like 2 clips, but I was double rolling on cards. So this card has the whole thing, and I've been just like cracking up watching it. It's just fun to see that many people in a room again, right? And to be able to like approach someone with a mic and not have them like, but it also just like, it's funny. It's like one of the last times I really hung out with this dude, Ted, who used to be kind of a regular, and he's just on fire. It's a trip to watch him. He's like, watching him like freestyle and ad lib with all of these clubs is just like so much fun.
Yeah, it was really handy to have all that footage back from a few years ago. Like, I know that's been a hard thing for us, having just kind of started trying to create footage and just starting to film for our content. It's we don't have that storage, so we've been struggling definitely logistically with navigating COVID, and we've had a lot of cool ideas that haven't worked out because of it. And like we had reached out to a local coffee roaster that we wanted to kind of feature, and that ended up, we had to push it back and things like that. So definitely feel that logistical pain.
Yeah. It's been hard. We want to bring a lot of guests in, and even when we're filming ourselves, like working with unique camera angles, trying to keep everybody apart, but make it look like you're having a conversation with somebody. It's just, it's been interesting, but I think, we've been able to do a lot of cool stuff like this, and that's really helped build those connections. One thing I know personally that I've been doing is just picking up the phone and calling people that I normally don't talk to, or which is kind of how you and I started touching base too. It's like people that you would see at trade shows a couple times a year and see at Homebrew Con, and well, that's not happening. So how do you keep that up, right? Trying to pick up the phone and FaceTime somebody that you thought you would have had a beer with in the next couple months, and it just doesn't end up.
Yeah, one of the coolest things I've seen kind of come out of this unfortunate situation is homebrew comp. Well, it was a mead competition called Valkyrie's Horn, and it's local to the Twin Cities, which I haven't mentioned yet. I'm in the Twin Cities. I'm in the basement of a St. Paul house. So Valkyrie's Horn, this I don't know what you call it, I guess governing committee or organizing committee, they basically wrote up a document. Like, I think they're going to make this open source so anybody can share it. They really worked for a couple of months, and they talked to other comp organizers and the AHA, I believe, and they kind of came up with this master document on running a virtual comp. And I got to watch it in real time because the competition was last month. I helped judge it, and it was really weird, but also as cool as it could still be. A local brewery, Broken Clock, gave them like a cold storage room, so they were able to kind of do the cellar part, and they organized all the boxes. Like, when I picked up my box, there was 2 flights already in order, and it said flight 1, flight 2, and then all the sheets were online, which I'm like, this is one thing that even when things get back to normal, like, we should keep this. Like, it was way easier to type notes than like really progressively sloppier handwriting through flights. You know what I mean? Like, it was super cool. And then, I zoomed with the guy, Ryan, that does the Mead House podcast, and we would do it just like we do. We'd each take our like 5 or 10 minutes, we'd throw our score out, and then we'd kind of talk backwards from there. And then like Ken Schramm did the best of show virtual, and did like a virtual tour of Schramm Meadery. So I was like, man, as bad as this is and as wonky as some of this feels versus like in person, it really opened my eyes to like, kind of why haven't we been using these tools before? Before, like, I wouldn't interview someone in Seattle because I didn't have the money to fly to Seattle. Where now you're like, dude, let's just talk. They can shoot some video with their phone on their end, Dropbox it, send it. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we've been getting stuff done to kind of like work around this. But yeah, the virtual comp is going to be insane. I mean, they had to cap it at 250, and when I was picking mine up, like 3 people came up from Iowa, like a 4-hour drive to get theirs because they just wanted to be a part of this, very specific competition, but it'll be interesting to see as we go into next year if the AHA follows that lead, or if other people kind of follow that lead. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, GABF is interesting this year, and they're doing a lot of cool virtual content. But the judging,
Everybody.
yeah, I got invited to judge this year, and just because of personal reasons and a lot going on, it's just said I can't do it. But a lot of people that I know that did go to judge are actually driving from San Diego, so that's not a short drive. But why don't you give us a little bit of background about your passions, right? Because I think a lot of it shows with the content that you put out there. But why are you doing everything you're doing with beer? Really is what it comes down to, and the food to some extent, right?
Yeah. Do you have that slide, the Chip Walton in a nutshell slide?
Should be up. Yeah,
okay. I'm just seeing the openings.
Yeah,
sorry.
You get the opening screen up.
I broke the smoke and mirrors. Well, first of all, I want to ask you guys, like, what are you drinking, right? I mean, it's midday, but we're in the beer industry. I promised myself I would finish the 750 of bourbon barrel-aged barley wine before the end of this, so I better get cracking.
It's
I'm just kidding. My boss is watching. I'm drinking coffee.
I've got this fresh San Diego beer.
Oh, man, that's good. It's 10
nice.
o'clock there, so that'll get you going.
Mm-hmm. It's a double IPA with Kvike.
So yeah, a little bit, I guess, like kind of how I got to be like this homebrew video nerd is for 10 years I was in television news broadcasting, which I kind of just fell into out of college. I was going to be a filmmaker. I was going to be the next Quentin Tarantino. But the first step to getting there was an overnight shift editing shitty newscasts in Birmingham, Alabama. So I was just editing video, and then I bounced around, and I moved up. I became a producer, an assignments editor, which is like the guy that pairs up reporters and photographers and gets them to different scenes. And then I was a field and feature producer, which means like I would go out and basically produce all these stories and then kind of turn it over to someone else to voice. So it looked like Joe Bickett went to the tortilla factory or the house fire, but I was really the one gathering that. So I learned a lot about scripting. I learned a lot about the workflow from capturing, conceptualizing, storyboarding, writing, graphics request if you have somebody else doing that kind of stuff for you. And then I started homebrewing in the last maybe like 2 or 3 years of that news career. I started homebrewing in Austin, Texas, and freelance writing, and really just getting into like the craft beer scene, homebrewing scene. And then yeah, I just like I also, as I listed here, I've been in like professional marketing and social media for like Summit Brewing Company and my first and second stints at Northern Brewer. And then I also listed, I'm just a social butterfly, man. Like I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. And it freaks my wife out sometimes because she's like a severe introvert. So she's just like, whoa, I don't know how you do this. And then I also listed here as a nod to Chappelle Show, I'm a habitual line stepper, man. I don't know when to stop. Sometimes it works out. A lot of times it works out. A lot of times it falls flat.
Yeah, just keep going. We had a comment on here. And can you guys see the right slide now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Cool. It says, Chip and Brewing TV got me into homebrewing, got me into pro brewing. Native Texans still waiting for their prodigal son to return. And we got some other questions too on more yeast handling that we'll get to in a couple slides. But to piggyback on that, I completely agree. Like those, I would wait. I don't know if it was like every other week or if you even had a schedule for those Brewing TV episodes to come out. But I was, beginning to homebrew too, and this must have been 10 years ago now, right? And I loved those.
10 years ago,
I loved those episodes coming out. I was studying for my certified cicerone exam and just homebrewing as much as I could. I was in a little apartment. I've been in San Diego for most of my life, but I was in just outside of DC at the time. So I was doing some extract brewing. The beer was all pretty terrible. And I look back now and it's completely obvious why, rookie mistakes, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And I think those episodes that you guys were doing were definitely before a lot of that content was like super available, right? Like I was on Beer Advocate a lot, and I've said this a lot since, but I think what helped me with my sensory skills so much was when I first started drinking beer, I would go and rate every single beer on Beer Advocate that I drank. And it just got to the point where I would get another porter, and I've never had, this might be the third porter I ever had. And I realized that I kept describing them the same way. It's all chocolate and roast and coffee, right? And like all of that's accurate to some extent, but I was like, if I'm just describing these beers, what makes them different? Because I know I'm tasting them and they're different. But when I'm writing this down, I'm writing it the same way. How can I expand my vocabulary to differentiate these beers to somebody that's not able to try them or has never tried them before? And that really helps. It's just like anybody doing BJCP judging and those score sheets and filling the whole thing out. Like talking within people that also have that understanding and are sharing that experience is one thing, but communicating that experience to somebody that's not there is very difficult. And I think that's what I kind of saw with what a lot of you guys were doing, or some of the Brewing Network stuff, like sharing that conversation with other people that maybe weren't there, and teaching them through not like a tutorial way, right? Not saying, this is how you make a yeast starter, keep it stirring, keep oxygen present, keep it between 72 and 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Like that's not what I wanted when I was learning. I wanted to know that brewing was easy and accessible, and I kind of equate home brewing to like playing bass. It's really easy to produce something that gets you by, but it's really hard to be a very extreme example of a musician, right? It's like it's easy to hit that low level and make a beer that tastes good and impresses your friends, and you can hit those bass notes and be all right on a bass, but to be like somebody that's above and beyond is just like, it's very difficult and requires a lot of skill and practice.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot. So like I was in news, I was home brewing, I randomly went to Northern Brewer on like a warehouse tour with a friend I'd met, and Jake Keeler was there, and he was like, we've been thinking about doing some videos. And I had been kind of inspired because I bought this Midwest kit, and it came with the DVD. 2008, y'all, DVDs. So I watched it, and it was the guy who owned Midwest at the time, and he was just like standing profile with like a kettle on a stove, and he was talking you through all the processes, but then he would say things like, oh man, if you could just see this. And I wanted to be like, pick up the camera and like take it over there. And so like, granted, I know they did other generations of the video where it got there, but that's what really, like, when I talked to Jake, I was like, yeah, like I want to be the eyes going down and into a kettle, or, and he was like, we have people that already work in Northern Brewer that are like artists and video people, but they don't really have a desire to learn that much more about home brewing. Whereas I was like, I know there's very few things that happen in an active brew day, and I know where to be for those. Like, I know the word's going to come out here. I know 15 minutes, we're going to get one of two hop drops, so you better get it. So it was a mixture of those two things. And then, so they brought me on to Northern Brewer, saved me from going down a life of news production, possibly for the rest of my life. And so the first step was DVDs, YouTube videos, like what we all see, how to do blank, how to do this. But he was like, we have this idea. And I looked it up. I keep everything. So I found all these planning documents from 10 years ago when I was moving down to this basement office. And it was like, we want to start something called Homebrew TV. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad that we called it Brewing TV. And it opened the door to go do craft breweries just as much as breweries, which, now Chop and Brew, I kicked it open another notch. Like, well, say there's not some brew to do. But man, I learned so, like, I'm going to start crying. No, I probably wouldn't be a home brewer if I hadn't started that job at Northern Brewer the first time. A, because it just put me around tons of brewing and brewers. Like, now it was our job to some extent to be brewing, and the brew cave was open on Saturdays, and you could, but part and parcel with that is like people like Dan Booty, Michael Dawson. I mean, like, dude, when you are like my job is hanging out with Michael Dawson all day. You start learning a lot of shit really quickly. And it's happening again now with Brad, the brewmaster at Northern Brewer now. He's kind of like the 2020 version of that position that Dawson was in. Like, I've just been hanging out with him, shooting a bunch of videos, asking probably way too many questions, habitually line stepping with brewmaster Brad. But yeah, man, it got to the point where I didn't have to brew as much because I was really absorbing stuff. And I think this would be the equivalent of, even if I wasn't that video producer, of what people are getting out of shows and forums and, you know, Brewing Network and podcasts. It's like, well, you can absorb just as much by hearing and seeing as by doing. And then it made me feel a little bit more confident when I went into the brewing part. But then, like you were saying with Brewing TV, it was an every other week. It started as every week. And I think by like, I can't believe it. I think Jake was telling me that we made it to like episode 10 or 12 on that schedule, which is bonkers considering how much other stuff. And that's probably what happened was like Chris Farley, who owned Northern Brewer at the time, was like, what's up with those DVDs that we hired this guy to actually do to help sell starter kits? You know, I get the community piece, but so we went to every other week, and it was literally like 1 week we would capture stuff for Brewing TV, and then it would just sit on a card. And then we would do Northern Brewer, true Northern Brewer product demo, whatever. Then that next week, they would just leave me alone. I would just live under headphones to edit a Brewing TV all week. And then the next week, we would flip the script, and it would be Northern Brewer. So there was a frequency to it that people really wrapped their heads around. Like, people would get pissed. Like, I feel like maybe we had set like 11 a.m. as kind of like the informal release time. And if it wasn't up, people would be hitting up like Facebook and just be like, where's the new Brewing TV? I was just like, holy shit. So like, it got cool to get like, ooh, people, you know, this is like must-see TV Thursday night on NBC over here.
Yeah, so if you were going to be recognized in any community, right? How's the homebrew community treated you for that, right? It's it's always interesting.
Back to the comment from Texas. Like, it's always shocking. Like, I understand how many people tell us they got into homebrewing, but like, dude, it's overwhelming and always humbling. Like, how many people are like, I'm a pro brewer because of Brewing TV. And I'm just like, all we were 3 homebrewers with a camera, you know, talking about homebrewing. And then like maybe every 5th or 6th one, we're off talking to an actual brewer. But it hasn't happened much like lately, but there in those first years, I would say like after leaving Northern for Summit, I was still getting, especially because at that point, I'm now going to like GABF and repping Summit. And I got more into that beer world. I remember the first time I went to GABF, I went with a packaging kid, Steve Secor. That's right. I forgot about this. So we go to GABF, part of the Summit crew. And this would be like the first year after Brewing TV kind of like stopped because me, Mike, and Jake went on to other craft beer things. And people were just like, Brewing TV, Chop, Brew, what was the Alpha Brew, Brew for All? Like at least 100 times in the first session. So like Secor actually made a sign that was like, yes, this is Chip from Brewing TV. And he just like walked around next to me with it. Because people, that was the time where the pro side was like, holy shit, we made all of these or helped inspire all these pro brewers by just having a video show that did how to brew the book and brewing classic styles and all the Zymergies and all the brew your owns. But it really just like made it to where, I don't know, I think it took some of that fear away, right? And some of that intimidation to see somebody do it. I know I watch cooking videos a whole hell of a lot more than I read cooking magazines. So
well, I think it helps to
I'm not gonna say no one else was doing it because like I was originally. Oh yeah, go.
Yeah, I think it helps to like see people that you would, you know, when I would brew with my friends, it's, you know, every 2 months, if even, especially these days. And then I'm brewing with my father-in-law a lot because he's in my bubble that I get to hang out with. But when you see people that you resonate with and that you feel like are people that you would be homebrewing with, it kind of recreates that experience a lot. And I think the homebrew community is just so passionate, and there's always so much pent up energy that, you know, we all love talking about this stuff. Unfortunately, we're surrounded by it a lot, but a lot of people aren't, and they don't have a lot of people that are outside of Facebook or whatever that they can have these conversations with. So when they see somebody and are around, at club events and stuff, it's just like that positive energy just pours out, and it's so tangible, right? Like club night, when you're there, like you feel it in the air, like it's electric, and people are just so excited to pull out the special bottle from behind their table and show you and all that. And I've been very fortunate to work for a company like White Labs that it's helped kind of establish a lot of that. And I think what we're doing with a lot of the content we are now helps support that and give back a little bit, right? And just show like, hey, we're really passionate too, and this is why we're doing these things. I have like more than a handful of experiences of traveling or wearing my company logoed shirt somewhere and somebody stopping me, or seeing that we've got these orange totes with our logo on it at the grocery store, somebody stopping me in line. But it's it's generally always homebrewers, because there's a lot more of them than the professional side. But I'll never forget, my wife was in the hospital for a viral infection like years ago, and it was scary. She was in and out for a week at urgent care, couldn't figure it out. I get the call at work. I'm going to the ER, like, come meet me there. So I show up. She's in this isolated room because they were afraid that she was able to transmit and catch something. And we're in there for 8 hours in the ER, and it's just a crazy stressful experience. And this nice younger RN keeps coming in, checking on everybody. I'm going to move you guys upstairs. Okay, no problem. Talk to him a little bit, but he's very professional. He's ex-Marine. And we get in the elevator. As soon as the elevator closes, he goes, "Oh, you work for White Labs?" Because I had my work shirt on because I came from work. And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh man, I homebrew. I wanted to ask you about this the whole time, but it just kind of seemed inappropriate for him." And it was just so funny to see, like, he's dying inside to talk to me about homebrewing, but knew that it was a very personal time. Whereas I would have been happy to cut the tension and talk about that a little bit more. But there's been so many times where people get that glimmer into that shared passion, and the way that it opens up is just kind of interesting. It's always very positive, which is awesome, because nobody's ever looking at White Labs on my shirt at the grocery store saying, I'm going to talk to this guy and tell him what I really think. It's always something exciting and positive, which is really cool. We had a question come in for you. And as I said, there's a couple other questions that are more yeast related that we'll get to before we wrap this up today. But says Video Nerd here, what cameras have you used throughout the years for your homebrewing content? And do you miss log and transferring footage?
I don't. So currently I'm horrible with like naming off models and stuff, but I use this guy. He's like a flip out. And he like has 2 cards. It's a second camera kind of like this that I've had. When I started Northern Brewer, Chris Farley, because I think they weren't actually sure that this was going to last, like I quit a news career to go to Northern Brewer for a job that was supposed to be part-time, and then like overnight became full-time but didn't. I was like, is this the right thing to do? Because I don't know if there's going to be enough work. And then so Chris Farley had a Canon that shot 2 tapes. Oh, you got...
What was it, like high 8 or?
I was about to break out an insane box of tapes on y'all, but I won't do that. But yeah, so it shoots on like mini DV. So we'd go on these trips. Oh my God! Like I was looking like Portland. The first time I went to Portland in March, April, May of 2020, I brought back 10 tapes because we got everything from like the Whitman Brothers, Fred Eckhart, to Beer Goddess. I mean, it was just, so anyway, so I started on a Canon, and then it was kind of clear that this was gonna like stick. We bought a card that shot to like SD cards, or a camera that shot to cards, which just like, I mean, because basically you're doing everything twice on those mini DVs. You're like logging it just to get it into the computer, and then you're logging it to know what's where. So yeah, and then, so now I use these HDs, and like other people, like, I don't know. As we're dealing with the Northern Brewer right now, I've been using my home gear as we kind of kick things back off at Northern Brewer. We have a budget to get some cool gear. I'm just very intimidated by gear purchases. So I know that most people use like those DSLR point and shoots, but like there's something, I just love this style of camera still. Like this, I want to get in there and point down to a kettle. I don't know. I just like this. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a kid from the 90s when everybody was just running around with their camcorders. But like, I have a hard time like thinking how tactile I want to be with like a DSLR kind of camera. And then like I got a GoPro 8 that I think is going to be kind of like the key to reality moving forward. Like I shot that burger making stuff yesterday for Charlie P with that, and it looks great. And I feel like as I have a kid, I'm going to probably have less moments where I want to set up like a tripod and some lights, and I'm just going to be like running and gunning with the GoPro 8. And I'm thinking about even buying just a second one to give to Badass Brian Adams and Leaf, two of my like co-host cohorts, whatever, because they're going deep into Grainfather world. And I was like, dude, if you guys just had a camera. So yeah, I'm not like a super, like people act like I probably know a lot more than I do about gear. Like I very fly by the seat of my pants. Like,
yeah, we've got,
if there's enough light in the room, I'm just going to shoot in it. Like I've started bringing light.
Yeah, I might have lost them.
No.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
What the hell? I know the guys banging on the front of my house didn't make my internet just go out, so I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, we've got the one person we didn't show, and this is actually James, who's taking some still shots outside of the
what up,
office here. Yeah, he's filming some behind the scenes that we hope to put into a pitch episode that people should see coming out.
On right here. I'm probably actually going to stop this at this point. We gotten enough, but yeah, I'm not a super gear nerd. I would rather put that time into like, it sounds ridiculous because without high quality footage, how well produced can it be? But I put so much more, I think, into like storyboarding and kind of moving through the content and just making sure that it's frequent, that I really don't get caught up. There are definitely people making stuff that looks better, and I know that, and I kick myself. I'm constantly feeling like I'm lapped. Like I've been getting lapped since like 2012. You know what I mean? Like all these new channels that I love to watch and totally respect. I'm like, dude, they probably have something way smaller, but it looks so much better. But I don't know. Just not a tech dude.
What we had another question come in for you, and maybe you could touch on some of the yeast and fermentation stuff that you've done too, which kind of ties into this slide on what's to come. But are there any homebrewing processes that you've wanted to develop content for but haven't been able to package it in an easy format? So like I'll speak to some of the stuff we've done first, and like our learning experience.
Yeah.
You know, we've only done 3 pitch episodes, but we've got 5 or 6 in the works. And it's just like, you know, showing that whole process is very time consuming, and it requires a lot of forethought, because being able to all sit down and do a tasting is awesome because you bust that out, and when it's done, it's done. But when it's come to coordinating a full brew day, and then, you know, like if you saw one of the, I think the last episode where I messed up a homebrew, a black IPA, you know, it comes to filming in my garage and then bottling. I just have like a low-end Nikon 3400 that gets the job done, but it's very still, right? Like, and the quality's good, but I have to set the shots up, and I've done some of the barbecue, some of the smoking shots for some of the other videos doing that too. But between that, bringing the beer to the lab, tasting it with Jacob, like it's required like 4 or 5 sit downs, and it's been very difficult. So I'm curious to hear, like, what are some things like that have been difficult for you? Like, have you guys ever tried to do like a sour beer that takes a year or 2 and you're thinking that far ahead? Or is there any just like logistical issues of filming? I don't know, I've seen all the decoction stuff, but, you know, maybe you want to do something that people don't have the equipment for.
Yeah, not really. I mean, so much of what I do is just kind of like documenting what I'm doing or what somebody else is doing. Like, so many people ask for stuff, and I have a list, and I'm just always like, oh, it'd be awesome to have a decoction video. Or people are just like, we just want a really good like style profile on porters. And it's just kind of like, that's where I fall short of like, well, if it wasn't on my list of things to do, now I have to recruit someone. Granted, I have some some dudes that brew like an absurd amount, like my buddy Paul Illa, he would take any of that. But now, yeah, like you said, the problem now is like, okay, he can brew it and shoot it, but how, I guess it's just going to be Zoom and talk about it. But this is where I think like, and I know that having worked at Northern Brewer again now since like around July 4th, has done two things. Like it's helped just like feel way more fulfilled in my day job every day, which is awesome. It has also like helped the rhythm or the release. I don't even know if I'll call it a schedule because it's very sporadic, but it's definitely increased the frequency of Chop and Brew. I would have thought going back to work at Northern Brewer, I might have stopped Chop and Brew because I'm like, well, I'm scratching that itch every day. But they're two totally different itches to scratch. So now I'm like waking up, doing like an hour and a half of editing on Chop and Brew. And then I just kind of like closed that project, open Northern Brewer. And now like I've already got like, you know what I mean? The juices going for the day. I'm already like primed a little bit. But I also think a lot of these ideas that I have for Chop and Brew will make better Northern Brewer ideas. Because there's always going to be Brewmaster Brad or other people there. Or it just becomes like when it's your 8-hour work day, now you can actually figure it out pretty easily. But when it's your passion project and it's like, you've been doing something else for 8 hours and then you're like, oh man, can I really sink 2 or 3 hours into this other project? So yeah, I'm hoping that a lot of that list, and I have no qualm sharing the list. To me, it's about getting the content out there. I'm not making millions off that Chop and Brew, and I don't want to like spread it too thin. Like more than anything, I want people to be able to get pointed to a link of something that they suggested get done, because that's only going to help them suggest more cool things. So like at Northern Brewer last week, we did a kettle sour. It took like 3 days for that full process. It's fermenting. Hopefully it'll be done and packaged and tastable by like late this week. So if anything, it's already proving that point that like something that I would not have committed to do at home for lack of time or someone else to actually do it. Being back at Northern Brewers put me back in that seat where I'm like, yes, I'm just behind the camera. I'm kind of like directing, or I'm prompting for things that I know need to be said or heard, but I don't necessarily I miss so much stuff when I self-shoot a brew day that I have to go back in and voice over and be like, you didn't see it because I forgot to roll, but I actually did this thing
and
here.
That's what happened with our last episode. Yeah, it totally got screwed up because of trying to balance filming. Come get this shot, or the audio. It's like the propane burner I use is so freaking loud. It's like, oh, it's too loud. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Like, I can turn it off for a minute just so we could get the shot and then turn it back on. But it takes a big skill. But, so like a big reason. So like a big reason that, we've started doing a lot of the content we've done. So, you see the product videos like Seltzer Max and that kind of stuff. And being able to have an in-house team to help with these projects has been great. But a lot of what Jacob does is oversee some of our beers that come from White Labs Brewing Co. and then our tasting room too. Jacob, you kind of want to touch on that a little bit and how that really ties in and some of the cool videos we've been showcasing with that.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a little background just because I know when I introduced myself, I just said my title, but it doesn't really explain what I do. But I have a part in the education side, which is like our, our digital content and the classes we give and things like that. But then also I'm overseeing and running the tasting room we have. So I have really strong connection with our brew house and the beers that are coming out, and all the planning that goes into that. So with that being said, we want to essentially bring that to everyone right now because we're closed. We're to go only. We're open, but to go only. So essentially you can't come in and try a flight.
We're based in San Diego, but our brew pub in Asheville, North Carolina is a little bit, their lockdown's a little bit less severe right now. So You can go check that out. But San Diego has still been quite a struggle.
Yeah. So, developing this stuff is kind of just to reach out and bring the concept we have, trying the same beer with different yeast strains, and then also kind of giving our point of view on the industry, on homebrewing, on beer in general through the lens of someone who works for a yeast manufacturer. It's a very different lens to look at the products through, and we think we can kind of connect on that level as well. So there's been, everything you guys have talked about. I feel like I've had like some experience where like with homebrewing different ideas and the challenges with that, like in that question we had, we've had a lot of ideas and brainstorming sessions where we've come up with video plot lines that were just not going to work due to COVID or due to the current state of the industry. Like our first cubicle brewing video, we couldn't really bottle it and taste it because of, stay at home and things like that. And so yeah, it's been interesting. But it's a lot of fun, and trying to learn that has been a really cool experience, trying to learn how to bring this content to everyone.
Yeah. And we've seen it through some of the tasting videos, right? Again, we're doing these, our brewery set up just like a lot of home brewers set up their brewing system. And what we do is we've got a 20-barrel brew house, which is pretty significant. And we're producing a lot of wort, but it's primarily used for yeast propagation. So the idea was, if we're going to have this nice fancy 4-vessel system that you can do program mashes and you can get multiple batches going at the same time, you have a lot of control over what we're producing. Why don't we throw some fermenters in there too and use it to make beer, not just yeast food? And so we've got what we call the Fermenter Farm. And if HomebrewCon ends up happening this next year, I think it's supposed to be in San Diego. It'd be great to have everybody out and do a fun event. But we've got 16 5-barrel double stacked fermenters. So, usually if you have, let's say you've got a 5-gallon kettle and you're doing 5-gallon batches at home, you're going to have a 5 to 6.5 gallon fermenter, right? With some of that headspace on there for your krausen and all that. But we took that approach of homebrewers and scaled down. We scaled the opposite. So we've got a 20-barrel brew house with 5-barrel fermenters, meaning every time we brew a batch, which is usually half batches these days, we split it into 2 fermenters and then pitch 2 different yeast strains. So how many homebrewers have split it and done different dry hopping or added different ingredients, but it's the same base wort? So it's cool to see that on a commercial scale, because we've learned so much from the yeast handling side for that. But, when we're talking about going digital, it's like, how do we get that information out there and make it accessible? Because I can show you what our brew logs look like and what our analytical data looks like, but it's overwhelming. It's a lot of information. The easiest way to showcase that is through a tasting room and putting the beer in front of somebody, which is, very difficult to do right now. And when we're making videos like this, it's one thing to kind of BS with your friends and have some time to talk about things and get to know people. But when you're talking to a camera, how do you make that engaging but also accurate? And that, I think, has been a challenge, because something that could take us 2 minutes in person by giving you this flight and explaining the differences takes an hour to film, because you mess up the name of something or somebody walks by and screws up the audio, and which is why we're in indescript offices today, because we want to do this in the tasting room, and it's like we're an active production facility, and closing that off is not super easy. People tend to not listen.
Yeah, and I think another struggle has been for us, like creating our content to be for everyone and what that audience is. And because, here when we're talking in the office and stuff like that, everything we talk about can sometimes be very technical, and you can get kind of down this wormhole of, using numbers to describe things and, discussing things by the WLP 518 and things like that. Whereas when we're talking to the camera and we're trying to provide a large audience with content that everyone can connect with on some level, it's like you got to take a step back, and that's been a challenge, maneuvering that as well.
Yeah, and to different audiences and different skill levels. Before I change the slide, the one thing I will mention that, starting to make this content that I hadn't considered is down here, me in my kitchen. And, I didn't really think much of it, because that's generally, where I do part of my brewing and bottling and all that. And the week after that episode was released, I had multiple people say, "You've got a nice kitchen." I didn't think that I was like opening up part of my personal space in life that like,
oh yeah,
you know, it's like I told my wife that, and she's like, "Oh, that was my first thought." It's like, you see my dog bowl and the bottle brush in the back and stuff, and it's like, oh, I didn't think about sharing that part of me with people because it's not what I was talking about while doing it.
Yeah, I was able to clear out what you see behind me, like just enough for it to not look like I threw everything I own in this room a week and a half ago. Haven't done anything. Like, it's all staged in a room over there, but this actually looks pretty nice, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it looks great, especially the face in front of the camera. But we do have a cool short clip that we wanted to share with everybody, a kind of teaser for the next episode of The Pitch, something that, you know, was our first off-site endeavor. So I hope everybody wants to take a look, and then we can keep chatting. Hey y'all, I'm Erik.
And I'm Jacob.
And we're here today at Homebrew Mart by Ballast Point, the very first place to carry White Labs yeast over 25 years ago. Come in and let's check it out. I can thank James for all the lo-fi music that's in.
You guys notice my hair is a little different in that video? Didn't even recognize myself.
Hippie, cut your hair.
Yeah.
So that's coming up next on The Pitch, y'all.
Yeah, and so you know, that one was cool because, again, like when this pandemic first happened, a lot of us started homebrewing a lot more, and you know, transitioning workflows and projects and all that, and just spending a lot of time at home. You got to keep busy, right? And so I was going to Homebrew Mart and just picking calling ahead or emailing them and picking everything up from their back alley that they were filling orders. And they finally started to open as they got a handle on things. And they've got a really cool tasting room and all that too. And it's just a business that's really tied into who White Labs is. You know, Chris White started selling yeast there when he was just homebrewing with friends with Yusuf and Jack White, and it was cool to be able to work with them on showcasing a little bit of what they do. So what they've been doing is, you know, you walk in, you have to put gloves on, handling ingredients, wear your mask and all that, which is great, socially distanced. But they've started doing online classes, like introduction to homebrew classes. So we went by and hung out with them for the day and talked to them a little bit about the virtual stuff they're doing too. So it's across the board, and it's really cool to see everybody moving in the same direction, right?
Yeah, I want to answer. So Matt Bowling asked a question, aka Bat Moling. Could you go to my coming up slide, and I might answer that. So he asked, like, how do you guys determine what kind of content you want to cover?
This
you have that coming up.
It's back a few.
So, like, again, like, I wish I could do more that people ask, but really what I do is I just follow opportunities, or that, like, social butterfly. So, like, a year ago now, which is a total shame and ridiculous for people who are waiting for this, but I went to Norway. I got invited by this guy you see here at Ivar to come brew in his brew cellar, traditional 17-hour everything by hand and gravity process. So I've got a series coming out about those. You know, that was just him and I talking for almost like 3 years, him sending me soda bottles of his farmhouse ale, and then finally Elsa and I just pulling the trigger and going over there. Kavike is searchable, right? The SEO's hot. But more than that, it was an opportunity for me to do something in this life that I would probably never do if it weren't for, you know, having this opportunity. Black is Beautiful Brew Day, again, you know, following, I don't want to call that a trend, an initiative, a timely initiative. You know, we've talked to several pro brewers, including Marcus, who started the whole thing. The thing left to publish is still my own version that I brewed. Invert Sugar was totally like a fan ask, and I happen to know 2 guys who make it a lot for their milds and barley wine. I'm going to start doing like some 3-minute beer reviews to really like get out smaller chunks to
Mustard
kind of
beer, I'm
supplement
good.
the longer. Yeah. And then and then the real life parent and survival mode. I want to do like a nursing stout for Elsa, which needs to literally get brewed this weekend. But I think there's just a lot of things that are going to come up, whether they're like time saving or how do you wedge with the things that you still want to do in this new reality. So by and far, like, thankfully, because I am not afraid to ask people and just go out and get in the mix, like, my own interests definitely fill a really long to-do list. But then there's just always people, like, I've met so many people through, I met this really great family, the Chinyans, who we're now friends with, because they're like, oh, we do an Ale-tober every year. So like 3 or 4 years ago, there was an Ale-toberfest episode. I didn't set out to do it, but it's highly viewed. I mean, our most popular video is this one about making smoked snack sticks, which, like, when I started the show, even though it has the word chop in it, I would have been like, yeah, maybe we'll do something like that. But my friend Paul Fowler, and this is how I met him. Like, I've made more friends, honestly, like, through people pitching an idea. Pitching.
You did there.
And then, like, now, like, his video and the referrals come from, like, all of these, like, smoked meat forums. I mean, it also probably comes just through recommended from people watching other channels that people are talking about. But it's like, it's bonkers how, like, me just following, like, yeah, dude, because he brought snack sticks over the first time I ever met him, and they were to die for. So he was like, oh, I'm going to make another order next fall, blah, blah, blah. So he was like, do you want to document it? I was like, more than anything, I just want to see this for myself. And that's what, kind of back to what we were saying about brewing TV, I think it worked so well because I was just always so literally interested. I'm like, what are you doing? You're going to boil this mash? I don't understand what's happening. So, like, I kind of feel like it's basically like home videos of my own mind getting blown by other people's interests. And then it just happens that other people clearly want to see that too. What's up, Matt? Whoop, whoop.
We've got a couple more minutes so we can try to breeze through, but if people want to find out more, and I'll everybody gets a follow-up email too, so I'll throw all your links and stuff in there for people too. But we've got a couple questions, a couple more yeast focused ones that we'll hit really quick, and then there's a couple more questions about content and just like educational resources. With extensive list of yeasts and so many options that could work for any given beer style, how do you narrow it down? If someone is trying to minimize the amount of strains they use, what are your top choices for clean ales, lagers, and yeast-driven styles?
We actually just did a video on that. Kind of basic steps, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how to select your first yeast strain. What's your take on that?
Well, in the video, we kind of discussed, obviously first you're picking a style, so that's going to narrow down a lot of different strains to choose from, right? You're talking about clean ales, lagers, and yeast-driven styles. You can kind of, based on what you're brewing, narrow it down to one of those three categories. And then, like the question says, there's a lot, once you pick that style, like if you're doing a British ale, you have a lot of choices from our catalog to choose from. And we kind of talked about whether you want it to be highlighting malt character, malt character or hop character for something like a British ale, and how there's different British strains that may benefit, whether it's going to be a bitter or a porter or a stout, whatever the case may be. And then from there, just kind of tailoring it to your own setup and your own abilities with fermentation temperature and things of that nature. But yeah, it was a really fun video to shoot, and I hope that helps a lot of people when they're trying to choose from 70 different strains down to a few.
Yeah, temperature and I think brewing conditions is the first question I ask, because I had a customer that I spoke to last week that used 300 Hefeweizen ale yeast and said I underpitched it, but I want more banana. Like, what other strain should I use? So, I said it's hard because you start, he said, oh, I read the catalog and I said you should try 380 Hefeweizen 4, but the catalog says that's, has balanced phenols, like a, clove-like character. And and it's true, but it's just like, it's so dependent and there's so many variables, but understanding like what your limitations are helps select those strains first, I think, because if you have perfect temperature control, perfect aeration, and perfect yeast handling, meaning that you're not repitching a bunch of times and you actually know if it's a healthy, viable culture, then you can start choosing any strain you want. But if you don't have that, which is most of us, right, there's a reason. Like I used to brew with and have a pretty elaborate setup, but over the last 6-7 years, I've kind of shed a lot of my equipment. My keys are kind of broke down, the compressor died on me, and so, you know, why have the 2 out of the 3 or 4 videos we've done on the pitch been about Kvike? Well, A, because people are asking about it a lot, but B, because it's been 90 degrees at my house and that's what I can use. So I think that's kind of my answer, is like, what, it depends on the limitations and what you have to work with. Chip, what's your take when it comes to choosing the right yeast strain?
I'm horrible, dude. I'm not much of a recipe developer. I follow other people's recipes, honestly.
Northern Brewer's got a lot of good recipes, a lot of kits.
Yeah, they do. A lot of kits, a lot of good recipes, and like, to a fault, possibly, I've been just all about these indigenous Kvike flakes that I get from Norway, not even like the U.S. lab ones for the most part. Like I brew so infrequently, and I'm still exploring that space. Oh, did you see that? The little hop shop light just popped on. It must be nighttime at the hop shop. Yeah, I've just been really down that rabbit hole. I'm trying to do like more traditional things with that, like alderwood, steeped mash water, and juniper and smoked malt. So I've been chasing more kind of like doing an American version of these traditionals, instead of like, I'm going to throw Kvike in an IPA. I'm going to throw Kvike in a lager. I want to do those things, but I just keep getting, like, I'm going to do an interview this weekend with like Lars and a couple of other people that are part of this like traditional ale festival in Norway that's going to go viral, virtual this year for the first time. So I'm going to talk to them on Zoom. And so I've really just been kind of like in that space in my personal stuff, which is why it's nice to like be back in Northern Brewer. Like, let's talk about kettle sour, or let's talk about lagers, like to remind me that like I did brew, what did I brew? I brewed one of Northern Brewer's kits, a fresh squished IPA, and I think you pitched juice in it from Imperial, sorry. And but like I forgot that shit actually takes time to ferment. Like I've been so used to like 3 days from now and then we'll be drinking it. I was like, oh yeah, like it didn't start for like 12 hours. Like, oh, you forget that that's a thing. So
yeah. Well, we could talk about that all day. Temperature is the big component, I think, more than yeast strain on that, which is what people get confused on. It's like you could pitch juice at 90 degrees and it'll take off. Probably it's not going to taste very good.
That's true, I guess. Yeah,
but it'll ferment quick. So
I wonder if that'll be the next thing that happens. People will be like, well, what else can we really push? Because like the literature said a certain thing for so long.
Yeah.
You know, where is your threshold for off flavors?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to get a lot of acetaldehyde from some of the Kvike strains, but I don't know if that's just me. But there's so many other strains out there too. So again, we got a couple more minutes before we got to wrap up, but can we address viability of starters in brewing today? There are brands advertising you don't need them due to cell counts in the new pack. I still seem to have better results when working with yeasts, and interested thoughts. So I'll just cover that real quick. Starters are never a negative thing. The only negative is you're adding one more process that can risk contamination, right? So if your yeast is happy, there's a good chance that any possible contaminating organisms might equally be as happy, right? So you have oxygen, you have a lot of nutrients and carbohydrates, and warm temperatures in your starter, right? Your yeast is happy. So anything else gets in there, it's also going to be happy. So that's really one risk. But other than that, you're not really doing too much for the yeast. But as opposed to, a lot of people look at it as getting an increased cell count, which, you know, you do get some growth, but really what you're doing is you're you have like your yeast is in an active metabolic state. So when you pitch it, it's already going, like it's already ramped up and stoked to be there. So I think what people say, you know, when they say better results, I think that's very subjective, but they'll see a quicker takeoff, right? The shorter lag time. And that's a big reason why. And a lot of times that's equated to being better, which maybe it is, right? Maybe you have a barbecue in a week or whatever, and minimizing that lag time just gets you your beer a little bit quicker and more rest assured that it is taking off. But when it comes to the resulting beer, it's likely that it might not actually change it that much, other than that initial lag in growth phase. You might see some difference in flavor production, but again, with home brewing, there's just so many variables that it would probably be pretty hard to dictate that. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you like doing starters, they say go ahead and keep doing them. Thoughts on shaken, not stirred versus stir plate?
Scott out east.
Yeah. Activity is going to affect that a lot, and keeping that yeast in suspension. And to be honest, though, I always have the attitude: do what I say, don't do what I do. Because when I made starters, I would do the whole walk by every couple hours and swirl the hell out of it, and you know, make sure it's all in suspension. But there's the right way of doing things, and then there's the way that I prefer, the corners that I personally cut. So keep doing what you're doing. Do you see the AHA using more virtual video content going forward, possibly breaking up HomebrewCon into several events over a 12-month calendar? Chip, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, I assume that they would have to. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I went to the virtual HomebrewCon and watched a couple. I watched more of them after the fact, or just downloaded kind of the presentation and got the gist of it. I don't know if it's going to work as well as like a centralized thing, right? Kind of like you said, it's all about that club night. It's all about having access on Pro Brewers Night to pro brewers, and also getting to go see these other cities. You know, the whole point that HomebrewCon is awesome is, like, for the most part, they're always in great cities that you can like bookend with a lot of visiting. So I don't know. It's tough. I don't know. This year people pivoted really well, but I just don't know if people want a second annual virtual anything. Like, this is an unpopular opinion, but I think a lot of people should have just, you know, and there's got to be money to get recouped. I understand you rented like all this stuff, you set up ballrooms, but I feel like we should have just canceled a lot of these things, because if anything, it might have just, it made people kind of have just this much reason to be like, well, this is still happening to this degree. I'm just like, man, couldn't we have all just taken a, you know, I don't know. I ain't trying to get into politics, but I feel like we could have had a much harder stop to figure things out, versus like doing things kind of not at 100%, right? But we can't just
human
stop
element's
life
hard,
because
though.
of it.
Yeah, that's what's hard, is that stuff keeps people going. I've been looking forward to football for 6 months just because it's,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
some
true.
resemblance of normalcy. And
Yeah,
you know, but the way I consume a lot of that's different than a lot of other people that might go to a big sports bar. I wait for the kids to go to bed and crack a beer and, you know, watch a condensed version of the games. But
yeah. Let's do, or can we do this Josh question real quick? Because I think that's an interesting question. He's basically asking, like, in this growing world of craft beer and homebrew content, do you think there's room for more? Is there a bubble bursting, or is this competition? Do y'all see it as competition when you see, you know, Clawhammer or Doing the Most, or Barley in the Hop TV, or Chop Brew, or Northern Brewer?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you are probably a better one to answer this because you've been doing it a lot longer, right? So, like what we've done, and we were very fortunate that we've been doing digital content for the last couple of years. We've been doing live webcasts of our workshops. We've been doing one-off workshops, most of them paid and all focused to the pro brew community. So I think a lot of people haven't seen the stuff we've been doing. So we have a on-demand learning platform where we have currently 3 paid classes or courses, one on sour beer, one on reusing yeast, and one on many flavors of fermentation, which is more of an overview of some of the major metabolites and how ingredients interact with each other. But they're, more, the curriculum's a little more serious and a little more technical, right? And so we've been developing that for a long time. So when all this happened, transitioning to opening up to engage, the different communities, both pro and homebrew, it was really easy for us. We saw a lot of other suppliers and stuff jump on that, but it took a little bit longer because, even figuring out, do I want to use Zoom? Do I want to use GoToWebinar? If I want to do an on-demand course, what does that look like? We were very fortunate in that regard. So I think a lot of people that have been doing it a long time, see it as welcoming, but I think personally, it comes down to quality. And when I mean quality, I don't necessarily mean production value. And I hope everybody sees that we feel like we put a lot of quality into our production value and get cool shots and put cool music behind it. But really what it is quality of personality and quality of content. Like is what's being discussed relevant to the person watching it? Because, what I end up watching at night on YouTube before I go to bed is one person sitting in front of a camera, with a cool background. No offense, Chip. But, just talking about a personal experience or, essentially being somebody that you'd want to sit down at a bar with.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it really comes. As long as somebody's passionate, it doesn't matter what it's about, because I watch a lot of surf videos. I think Jamie O'Brien's like the guy that I really watch. I don't surf, but he's got a good personality and I love hanging out with him. So, and it's cool videos. So I think there's always room for that. And I think, there's a lot of people, if you just do like a cool one-off video, it might get lost, but fortunately it lives to stand the test of time. So maybe people don't watch it now, and people will watch it in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But as long as the content is still relevant, it's just going to keep building on itself. That's my take. But you have a lot more experience in this space, so I'd be curious to what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's always room. I think there's room, especially for more like if someone's really chasing a certain thing. Like I can't remember his name, shamefully. I think it's Homebrew Challenge might be the channel, but this dude's brewing like every style in the BJCP. I'm like, that is a mission, and people will follow that for multiple reasons, all the way down to like this Doing the Most crew, who are just like doing the funnest, wackiest kind of needs lately. But I take, like you said, I take a lot of inspiration, honestly, from like non-beer, like a lot of cooking channels, like Brad Leone from Bon Appetit. I watch skate videos as if I live in SoCal or something. I watch Do a Kickflip like as soon as it drops.
Oh, yeah, it's great. Yeah, those are so good.
Yeah, because that's the kind of stuff that I think like ends up helping influence where I take the humor or even the editing, or I don't know. I definitely had to branch out from beer videos because I was just like, well, no one here is really doing. The only difference is how good stuff looks. Like, how good is your equipment versus like what are you doing? But I don't see it as competition. Like I see it as, like I said earlier, inspiration. It's also kind of frustrating when it was before I was back in Northern Brewer and it was just Chop and Brew. It really frustrated me because I didn't have the time. Like I said, I felt like I was getting lapped by people like way younger than me who would probably list me as like an inspiration. But I was like, oh, I'd rather be getting your 60,000 views instead of my 2,000 views. But I'll also take your nod as an inspiration. So I don't think it's a competition. I don't know. There's not money to be made in this space, honestly. There's money to be made in whatever else maybe it is that you do. So I think the more, like you said, the more the merrier, and the more niche it can get. What I don't need is another video on blank. You know what I mean? Like, I need a video like these Kavike videos that I'm editing. I'm like, yep, those are going to be the first American videos to show that. And that was like Ivar's selling point for the most part. He's like, there's Norwegian language videos like this, but you're going to be the first American to show this. So I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's how he got me to go to Norway. So yeah, I just want to see people do more stuff with this space. And it's tough right now because it is virtual, but I would like to see a world where there's just way more people doing like brewer interviews in craft breweries, or showing us like really wacky setups and that kind of side, you know, like, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely down the road for us, is we have such a cool network of partners. You know, as things loosen up and as we figure out how to still remain diligent while filming this in people's space, you know, we've got a lot of cool partners that have cool breweries, and being able to go to trade shows and film that, and you know, it's the sky's kind of the limit. So we hope to, you know, continue to do more videos like showcasing Homebrew Mart, but you know, could be from the largest scale to the smallest scale, and doing some club nights and club events and that kind of stuff. So before we wrap up, we've got a couple more Wednesday webcasts coming up next month. We do these monthly. Next month we've got 2. What we've got home cider making with Michelle Pagano. She's going to go through, we're going to talk about different ways of simplifying the process of making cider at home. And then the following week, we've got a perspective on fermentation with Pat Fahey of the Cicerone certification program. So, you know, both will be pretty rad on different subjects. And I think there's a lot that people can learn. So, you know, a lot of what we're going to continue to do are those evergreen videos, but really work with these discussions too, and bring people like you in and just kind of chat about what we're excited about and see how it resonates with everybody else.
Yeah,
so
did you guys see that video that he did? Speaking of badass videos.
Oh yeah, he blew up
every
with that.
style of beer explained. I was just like, bro.
That was really
good.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he said he was approached about that and thought they were joking at first. He's like, you know, there's a lot, and then, but I was like, dude, you got like 100,000 views in like a week. Like,
yeah. I've loved their tasting together videos. I've been watching those a lot, just refreshing on styles you don't talk about as much. It's been really nice. Drinking along.
With that said,
all right, guys. Well, I finished my 750. Cool. Day drinking coffee.
Yeah, rad. So if anybody wants to continue the conversation, find us Facebook, email, whatever you want to do, and we hope to meet everybody in person sooner than later. But continue geeking out about homebrew. And
if you're watching on YouTube, drop those questions below.
You've been doing this for a while. All right. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Sorry, I got like, what a horrible time to get like, I totally just got like, I just totally got time warped. Oh, bye. Unstable internet, damn you.